Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this IBPS Clerk and RBI Assistant 2017 Winning Techniques live session brought to you by TalentSprint. I'm positive that these sessions have been helping you in terms of sharing techniques and tips, assisting you in approaching these question types with ease. We've looked at a range of questions so far in this series. And for today's session, the topic, as most of you are aware, would be reading comprehension, the question type that most of us tend to skip in the exam, right? So irrespective of the difficulty level of the question type, whether it's easy, moderate, or difficult, right? The techniques that we will apply is pretty much the same. So in this short time that we have, let's take a look at what those techniques are, and I want you to register and start applying those techniques. One, apart from that, you all know what is quite important, or rather will prove an advantage for you when it comes to reading comprehension, is to have above average reading fluency, right? Your ability to read something fast and also understand what you're reading, which has to be developed as a habit. For most of us, we don't practice the habit of reading on a regular basis. So yes, if that is your challenge, then reading comprehension will be a challenge, right? But nevertheless, let's take a look at the techniques first, and then as time allows us, we'll probably look at a sample passage and see how we can apply those very techniques. Yeah. So I'd like to take a moment and say hi to those of you who are here this morning, which is Aditya, Shakti, Bala, Lovely, Shravant, Rahul, Vaibhav, Ashish, Alok, Mohan, Ashish, Rajiv, Manisha. Okay, some of the names are repeating. So welcome to all of you who are here. Yes, thank you. Good to know, Ashish. Helping a lot. That's exactly what we want these sessions to do, to help you a lot, right? That's the objective of these sessions. So first day of the week, and we're looking at reading comprehension, but we still need to change the way our attitude is towards this question type, right? We need to look at it. This is a question type which carries a possibility of 5 to 10 marks in your exam, and we need to look at ways in which we can maximize those scores, right? Instead of avoiding them or skipping the question type altogether just because we have a particular idea about the question type, saying it might be time consuming, or I might not be able to focus on other questions if I spend time on this. So it's just a shift in the way you think with respect to this question type. So let's quickly look at what the techniques are first, yeah, and then we'll move forward. Okay, so some of the techniques. Technique number 1 is try to maximize your score, and how can you do that? By answering the vocab questions first, right? We've practiced this earlier. You need to either apply context clues around the highlighted words in context, or while you look at the words, without even going back to the passage, you still might be able to figure out either the synonym or the antonym of a particular word, right? Because it may not be a difficult word at all. But in case it's a difficult word, then you can go back to the context and apply context clues, right? Which means the word is going to be highlighted in the passage. You look at the context where the word appears and try and figure out what can be the meaning of that word based on the context. So the context is going to give us some clues, hint words and clue words, right? That's the first technique. So if there are 10 questions, if it's a relatively longer passage, right? And if there are 10 questions, invariably you will have synonym antonym questions. So let's address, or let's try and complete that first. That's technique number 1. Technique number 2 is identify keywords in the questions and scan for those words in the passage to choose the right answer options. So basically what we're saying is, it's important for us to analyze the questions first, right? That's the first thing we do. So why do we do that? Because it will give us an idea. While we're reading the passage, we can focus and look for that. We can search for the answers that we need because we have an idea of what the questions are. So it's important for us to analyze the questions. So while we are analyzing the questions, there's so much work that you have to do in the background. One is look at keywords in the question. So you can scan for those keywords while you're reading the passage. That way also you can minimize the time that you take in getting to the answer quickly. The third one, technique number 3, focus on topic and closing sentence of each paragraph to get the gist of the passage and answer a couple of questions. So what do I mean by this? So the passage is usually divided into paragraphs, right? There might be 3 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs, whatever may be the case. What you are required to do is focus on the topic sentence. What's a topic sentence? It's the first sentence in the passage. And the closing sentence is the closing sentence of that paragraph. So what I'm trying to say is focus on the topic and the closing sentence of each paragraph, right? That way it will give you an idea. Okay, this is what the passage is about. The main theme or central idea of the passage is gist, this. What is the meaning of gist? Gist means what is the main idea, right? What is the central theme? You might have a question around that, right? According to the passage, what is the central theme of the passage, or what is a suitable title for the passage? For questions like that, if you just go through the topic sentence and closing sentence of each paragraph, it's going to help you. It will give you an idea. Okay, this is what the passage is about. Yeah? So gist means, for Aditya, what's the passage all about? The gist of it. If I have to summarize what this passage is about, right? If I have to give a one word or a one phrase after reading the passage, if you get to that central idea or theme, that's the gist. Okay? So now we have an idea of these 3 techniques. All right? What we're going to do is we're going to see how we can apply these techniques for a given passage. Unfortunately, Ashwin, this is a technique that you need to acquire, right? We do have the ability to be able to condense essential information. If I'm reading something and if somebody asks me, stops me and says, okay, Sylvia, can you just tell me, you've been reading this passage or book for quite some time. Can you give me an idea of what you read about, right? You should be able to explain what did you spend time reading on. Otherwise, what's the point of reading, right? If you can't understand what you're reading, then there's a huge issue, right? So robots, I don't know about robot scanning or not, but I definitely believe that you and I have the tendency to be able to condense essential information, right? This is something that we need to get into the habit of doing. Why? Because that's the level of competency that is required for a competitive exam like this. Whether you like it or not, you need to be able to do that, because a lot of them are doing it. If somebody is able to score full 10 marks in reading comprehension, they are applying strategies like this. Otherwise, it's highly impossible for them to get the full 10 marks, right? So let's look at the passage that we have. It's about, this passage has about 3 paragraphs. Okay? And if you look at it, if I just look at the first sentence and the topic sentence and closing sentence of these paragraphs, I have an idea already, because the highlighting words for me, or what is capturing my attention, is communication skills, communication styles, right? Sending and receiving messages, process of communication. Yeah? And it's referring to who are the people involved in this process, right? Sender, so the person who's giving the message, the person who's receiving the message. So it has to do, and look at the last paragraph also, good communication skills. Yeah, so we already have an idea that this passage is revolving around communication skills. But nevertheless, what do we first do? We try and answer the vocab questions. So let's look at the vocab questions. So it says here, choose the word which is most opposite in meaning to the word printed in bold. So I keep saying this, pay attention to what the direction is. Is it asking you for a antonym or a synonym? So this is an antonym. Abundant is not a very difficult word, right? I don't have to go to the passage to figure out the meaning of this word. So abundant means I know we're talking about sufficient supply, right? So from the given options, what can be the antonym of this word? Sufficient is a synonym, Ashwin. We are asking, the question is asking for an antonym. See, that's another thing that most of us get incorrect, right? We don't pay attention to the direction and we pick the wrong option, even though we know the answer. Yes, Rajiv, that would be correct, right? Abundant means enough, more than enough, right? Sufficient. However, the antonym is little, right? Most of you invariably end up picking the synonym instead of the antonym because you haven't paid attention to the direction. So we all know. So this one, without reading the passage, I've acquired 1 mark. Let's look at the next one, muddled. Now this might be a word that you may not be familiar with, right? So in that, what you can do is you can go back and scan for where this word comes in the context and then figure out the meaning of this word, right? That's one option. For some reason, the word is not highlighted here in the passage, but you know what I'm talking about. But for those of you who don't know the meaning of muddled, now, muddled means it's either something that is, in terms of, because the passage is about communication skills, so muddled means something that is confusing or some sort of a disorder, right? You're not able to follow what so-and-so is saying. So having said that, again, we're looking at antonyms. So if a message is confusing or if a message is not structured in a proper order, what can be the opposite of that? Look at the options. Skillfully organized, strongly controlled, clearly conveyed, isolated and complicated. What do you think can be the antonym of this word muddled? I've given you the meaning, right? Yes, Rahul, that would be correct. Clearly conveyed, right? So one of the things that we constantly keep doing, muddled again, there are different meanings, right? If I look at muddled outside of a communication context, muddled waters means dirty water. There's some sort of a particle or something that is dirtying the water. So obviously the opposite of that is clear water, in case you didn't know the meaning of muddled in a different context. So like I said, one thing is either I know the word or I don't know the word. But fortunately for us, the word is highlighted in the passage. I can go look at the passage where the word appears, read the context, figure out the meaning, right? Let's move on. So we've already acquired 2 marks without having to go through the entire passage. We are applying technique number 1, which is what? Let's do the vocab questions first. The next set of 3 questions is asking for a synonym. Right? Sounds. It sounds like. Again, look at my options. Seems, corrects, noises, takes, silences. What can be my answer option that gives me the same meaning as sounds? I came up with my own phrase, right? I'm putting it in a very common phrase that people use. This sounds like, or such and such a thing sounds like. So what can be the synonym of this word? Yes, Rahul, it seems like. Again, another 1 mark I've acquired. So I have 3 marks now altogether, right? Affinity. Affinity again is not a very difficult word, right? Another thing is, like for example, a couple of you came and said noises, right? The best thing to do is, you need to go and see how sounds appears in the context, right? That's another thing that you need to do so that you get the right answer. So let me try and get that here. Give me a minute. If you're able to identify where the word appears also. Look at this. The third paragraph, it says here, although this sounds simple and obvious, right? This is the sounds that they are referring about. So in the context, what meaning this sounds give? Most of you might come back and say, why can't it be noises? So that's why it's important for us to go back to the context. If you have more than two options that could be a possible answer, the best thing to do is go back to the context. And if you look at the context, yes, it says there, although this sounds simple and obvious. So although this seems simple and obvious is the only thing that I can substitute sounds in this context, right? Yeah, so that's why it is seems and not noises. So it's always good to do that. So in case you have more than one or two options that could possibly be an answer to the given question, the best thing to do is to go back and look at how it appears in the context and what will be the best word to substitute there. Affinity, partnership, partiality, weaknesses, compatibility, discord. We're looking at synonym again, right? So I can quickly eliminate wrong answer options, which is discord. Discord means some sort of a disagreement, a fight. I can eliminate weakness, I can eliminate partiality. I have to choose between partnership and compatibility. What can be the closest synonym for affinity? Is it partnership or compatibility? If you know the meanings of these two words, great. Now for those of you who don't know the meaning of affinity, now affinity means, let me write it. So affinity is a state in which two things are able to exist or occur together without problems or conflict. So having said that, if I look at my options, partnership can be just two people coming together as partners, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that they will not have a conflict or that they will not have a disagreement. So the best or the closest possible answer would be compatibility. Degree, the degree to which something is done or the extent to which something is done. Obviously it has to be extent, right? So we've looked at synonyms. So far all we've done is we've applied technique 1. We've said, let me try and answer the vocab questions first. There will be some questions that are easier for me to answer. There will be some questions where I might be a little confused. I might have 2 or 3 options that could possibly be an answer. I'm going to rely on the context and then figure out the answer. So I've got my 5 marks without having to spend time reading the passage, right? This is something that you should do in order to maximize your score. The second technique we said is we'll have to identify keywords in the questions and then scan for them in the passage. The third technique we also said is we're going to focus on topic sentence, closing sentence of each paragraph. That will also give us an idea of what the passage is about and possibly help us answer 1 or 2 questions here and there. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to apply technique 2 and 3 simultaneously. So let's go back and look at the questions. If you look at 6 questions, which of the following are essential for effective communication? Okay. Which of the following is true about rapport as per the passage? Which of the following must the teachers keep in mind to facilitate learning in student? Which of the following are the 3 elements of communication? Which of the following is the finding of the study on? Which of the following is the finding of the study on communication styles? Okay, so we have an idea about what the questions are, right? In fact, Jocelyn, if you ask me, IBPS clerk, you'll get a story-based passage, most predominantly, right? So that is even more relatively easier because stories are easier to read and the questions are directly from the passage, so you wouldn't have a problem. This is a sample of an RBI assistant previous year question paper. So I thought we'll take a look at that, have an idea of what's been given in the past and then learn from that. So that's what we're doing right now. So maybe you're referring to other exam patterns where the difficulty level could be slightly higher. Nevertheless, you can still continue to apply the same techniques, right, which will still help you score marks. Now, which of the following is true? So let's go look at the first one. Again, the sixth one, if you look at it, it says, what is essential for effective communication? Pause. I want you to pause and read the options. Conveying the message clearly? Yes, that is effective for communication, absolutely, very logical. Not to waste effort and opportunity? Maybe, maybe not, we don't know. Third, receiving the information with as little distortion as possible. That's also extremely important, right? If somebody is saying something, I should be able to receive it clearly. Whatever the message that they're trying to convey or communicate, I need to receive it clearly. Now, if I apply a little bit of logic, I know for a fact that if I have to communicate something to someone and they should receive it, understanding what the core message is, which means it might require some sort of an effort from my end because I need to choose my words appropriately, right? I need to keep in mind the communication level of my receiver, right? The knowledge level of my receiver, and then communicate something. So is there a possibility for me to apply or use some sort of an effort there in doing that? Yes. So I can't possibly say that option B is something that I will not apply, right? I will have to put in some effort there so that the message is clear and so that the information is delivered with as little distortion as possible. So I can safely say A and C, only A and C, which is option 1, right? Now this we did again without having to read the passage, just applying a little bit of logic. All I'm trying to say is most of us tend to skip RC even without making an attempt because we have certain pre-notions, notions meaning ideas about RC. All I'm trying to say is, in the exam, make an attempt so you will have an idea, okay, what is the level of this passage to start with? And then you can decide whether you want to answer or not. But I still want you to make an attempt so you don't miss out on getting marks if it's easier for you to get those marks, right? Here again, we've got another 1 mark without having to read the entire passage. Let's look at the next one. Which of the following is true about rapport as per the passage? What is rapport? Rapport building, they say, right? You must have heard of this word. I don't think it's a new word. But let's look at the options. It says it is a sympathetic relationship. It is based on understanding of other people's frame of reference. It helps in creating a strong bond. It is important for teachers to build rapport with students. And if I go back to the passage, right? Try and see if you can, yeah, so rapport is right here. So what exactly is rapport? So I've zeroed in on this keyword from the question. What exactly is rapport? And I have the answer right here. Sympathetic relationship, right? Creates a strong bond. First step to better communication. The primary goal of all true educators, so which means the teachers need to do this with their students, right? I have my answer right here. And if I go back and look at my options, almost everything is covered here. So which of the following is true about rapport? It is a sympathetic relationship. Yes, it's mentioned in the passage. It is based on understanding of other people's frame of reference. Yes, the passage covers that. It helps in creating a strong bond. Yes, that's also there. It is important for teachers to build rapport with students. Yes, it says that that's a primary goal of every educator, which means all are true. Option 5, right? So which of the following is true about rapport as per the passage? All of it. Yeah. So what we've done here is we've applied technique 2. We've identified the keyword from the question, gone and scanned that in the passage, and looked at context surrounding it for us to get the answer. Let's move on. Which of the following must the teachers keep in mind to facilitate learning in student as per the passage? Let's look at the options. It says to control the students such that they do not share ideas with others within the lecture hours, to maintain rapport with students and compromise on the course content, to realize that all students have different levels of strengths and weaknesses, only to keep the lecture rich in course content, to ensure that students adhere to her views only. Again, without having to read the passage also, I want you to apply logic, just like how we applied for the first question. The question is, what should the teachers keep in mind to facilitate learning in student? To facilitate, maybe, which is to encourage learning in students, right? In the given context, rapport means, affinity, understanding, some sort of a bond. You're empathizing with, your receiver whom you're communicating with. So we're talking about a harmonious relationship in which people are able to understand each other and communicate well, right? In this context, that's what rapport means. So Pankaj, I hope I've answered your question. So what can be the answer for this? Yeah, even if I apply a little bit of logic, I know it has to be option 3, because we're talking about, unless I don't understand the different levels, let's go back to the context. Unless I don't understand the different levels of my students, I cannot facilitate learning in students, right? Because everything else has a little bit of negative idea to it. Control the student. You can't facilitate learning by controlling the students and not allowing them to share ideas. You can't compromise on course content. You can't keep the lecture only rich in course content. You need to be flexible to be able to accommodate other sorts of learning materials and resources, because students are at different levels, their strengths and weaknesses, right? To ensure that students adhere to her views only, that is again incorrect. You can't restrict people's views to only think like you, right? So obviously it has to be option 3. What about the 9th one? Which of the following are the 3 elements of communication as per the passage? So as per the passage, if you go back again, where does this come? Yeah, in the second paragraph, it says right here, the process of communication is composed of 3 elements. What are they? The source, which is the sender, speaker, transmitter, or instructor, whoever is from which the communication starts. The starting point or the source of communication is the person who speaks, or the person who transmits, or the person who instructs, or the person who sends the message. And then I have the symbols. What are they using to communicate? Words or signs. That's the symbols. And the receiver. Who's the receiver? The person who's listening, the person who's reading, and the student, right? So we have an idea. Now go back to the options. So I have source, signs, and students. Source is, I know, is the sender, the transmitter, the instructor. Signs is the words and the symbols, right? Basically, you can use either signs or words. And then I have the students, who is the receiver. Seems like our answer, but let's look at the other options. And this is just to confuse you, right? So you need to pay very close attention to these options that are given here. Second one, source is fine. But remember, the speaker is still the source, right? So it can't be this. And sender is still the source. So these are just examples of source out. What about 3? Signs, but we already know that words and signs are the symbols. So it can't be that, because the source is missing. Instructor, source. Listener, receiver. But reader also is a receiver, right? So can't be this. Transmitter, the person who is the source. Student is a receiver. Then again I have receiver. So it has to be option 1, right? So it is an easy one, but there are some confusing options. So you just have to focus a little bit and understand who is the source, what are the symbols that they are using to communicate, which is words and signs, and then who is the receiver, right? The listener, the reader, and the student. So if you are clear with these 3 elements of communication, you won't get confused with the options. And then we are left with the last one, which is the following is the finding of the study on communication styles. Remember, I said one of the techniques we also use is to focus on the topic sentence and the closing sentence of the paragraph. So let's go back. So where did we find this statistics? If you remember, it was right there in the first paragraph, closing sentence. It says here, a study on communication styles suggests that 7% of communication takes place through words, 38% through voice intonation, and 55% through body language, right? So keep that in mind. Let's go back to our options. What does the option says? Option 1, the body language and gestures accounts for 38% of communication, outweighs the voice intonation. Nope. Only 9% communication is about content, whereas the rest is about our tone and body language. That is also incorrect. The tone of our voice accounts for 55% of what we communicate and outweighs the body language. No, more than 90% of our communication is not about content, but about our tone and body language. Yes. Why? Because if you do the math, what's the math? We're talking about 38% and 55%, that's over 90%, which is only tone and body language. So when it comes to words, we're saying it's only 7%, right? The remaining. So has to be option 4. Is not about content, because the content is only 7%, but about our tone and language. And that's exactly what the passage also says. Teaching is 50% knowledge and 50%, okay, this also you can eliminate. So it has to be option 4 as per the passage, right? So what we've done here is we've pretty much applied all the 3 techniques that we looked at initially. And this is something that I would request you to put into practice or make it a habit whenever you approach reading comprehension, right? You will not lose anything, but you will gain a lot by practicing it this way, right? Analyzing questions, trying to answer vocab questions first, and then of course, you also need to be smart enough to choose what questions you want to answer and what you want to skip, right? Because keep in mind that you have negative marking. So unless and until you're absolutely sure, don't go forward and mark an answer, but you still need to do your attempting. You need to attempt. So you have an idea, okay, this is what the passage is about, and overcome your fear of RC, thinking that it's going to be time consuming. It may not at all, right? You can still end up getting 6 marks out of 10 marks without even having to go through the passage. Yeah, so sympathy, empathy, it's a pretty standard thing. You know, if I see a beggar on the road, I can sympathize with the beggar, right, saying, oh, so sad, right, and that's about it. I move on, I continue. But empathy is going an extra mile and saying, okay, I'm putting myself in the beggar's shoes, right, and I'm probably I will be moved to do something to change the situation of the beggar, right? I might take an extra step, right? So that's empathizing with the beggar. You're feeling for that person, putting yourself in their shoes and trying to help them or change the situation for them, right? So sympathy, you may not end up taking an action. You can sympathize with a lot of people, right? You can, if you come across an accident on the road, you can sympathize with that person. Empathy is when you stop the car or the bike that you're riding or driving, you get down, you call the ambulance, make sure this person is, taken care of, maybe try and see if you can reach out to the people or relatives or near family, right? Dear ones, loved ones, contact them, stay with this person throughout, and whatever needs to be done, right? You're empathizing with that person. You're putting themselves, if I was in that position, what would I want other people to do for me? Right? That's empathy. Yeah? So, I just want to take time to say that it's not enough if you just stop with knowing techniques and strategies and tips, but you need to go back and apply them. And I'm sure you guys are doing that, right? If you definitely want to have an edge over another person, you need to do that on a consistent basis. So all the best for that. I will see you guys in another session. In fact, we have something on descriptive happening this evening. So if you're available, I'd like to see you guys at 5 in the evening. We'll probably spend some time on essay writing. And then tomorrow again, we have a session on letter writing. So those of you who want some assistance on that, I expect you to be there. Yeah? So take care and see you soon.